Hello everyone, Earl Henderson, Primordial Defense. Thank you for watching. Today's video is going to be on bug out bags, get home bags, inch bags, or I'm never coming home bags. Whatever bag that you have that has stuff in it that's going to help you survive from getting from point A to point B, this is what this video is going to be about. So you'll notice that I don't have a bag laying on the table. And reason being is, one, the bag that some of this stuff was in, I've dumped it out and I've washed the bag. But secondly, I didn't want to put a bag on the table because I didn't want this to turn into a show and tell. And I also wanted to point out that you need to select your items first before you choose a bag, because what you're going to find yourself getting into is, if you get a very large backpack, you're going to fill that thing to the top, and it's going to be full of a bunch of stuff that you may not ever need, probably never will need, and it's just not going to fit your needs. So what I would recommend is finding the stuff that you're going to be wanting first, the most critical items. Get those things first, and then find the appropriate size bag to put those into. That way you're not overloading yourself. This is something that I fell victim to many years ago. Got a big old bag and just started stuffing with stuff. Oh, I need this. Oh, I need that. Well, that fits in there. Oh, well, this fits in there too. And pretty soon I was carrying everything but a kitchen sink in that bag. And so you have to look at what is the most important items for your task that this bag is going to be doing. If you keep a bag in your car to help you get back to the house, then the things you need to consider are, what is the distance involved there? What does the environment look like there? If you work in a large metropolitan area and your home is in the suburbs and it's something like a 40-mile distance, well, then you're going to want to cater your bag around that. If you know for sure that that's probably about the max distance that you'll intend to use that bag for. Then you have to take into consideration of where you're going to keep that bag. If you work in a large metropolitan area, what kind of environment do you work in? Do you work in an environment where you got to take this bag through metal detectors and stuff like that? Will it raise suspicion? Is it just going to be a hassle for you to keep it in the office or your workspace? Or do you need to keep it in your car? How far away is your car from the office? Is it in a secured parking lot? Whatever. Those are some things to take into consideration. Do you plan on, when you take road trips, throwing a bag in the back of the car for odds and ends, for little emergencies here and there, and then be able to get back home in case something happens to that vehicle or whatnot? Your bug out location. Is your bag set up to get you from wherever you might be within a 100-mile radius of your bug out location, a 50-mile radius of your bug out location, a 200-mile radius of your bug out location? You figure those things out, then you figure out which items to put in the bag. So when we go to look to figure about what items we're going to need, we can look at things that are critical for us in terms of survival. So usually you'll see the rules of three thrown around in the survival circle. 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food, 3 hours without shelter, things like that. So number one being up there, air. So if you work in a very large metropolitan area and you need your bag, or you want your bag set up so that you can leave that large metropolitan area on foot and make it to home, and in between the city and getting a more rural environment, within your plan you think, oh, this could be the area I work in could be subject to terrorist attack, and there could be a bunch of dust and ash in the air, or radioactive dust in the air, what have you. Something like a particle mask could be something that you may want to keep in your bag. A gas mask could be something that you would want to keep in the bag. But it's going to be situational dependent. If you are living in a more rural area, maybe a particle mask wouldn't be high on your list. But if you're in a more metropolitan area, large city area, that could be beneficial to you. Think about 9/11 when the towers collapsed and blocks of city blocks were just covered with ash and all kinds of smoke in the air and dust and debris. Oklahoma City bombing, the area around there, just large events, not even just the terrorist type attacks, but natural disasters. Imagine a large earthquake, buildings have collapsed, there's a bunch of dust in the air, smoke, stuff like that floating around. Something like a N95 mask might be beneficial to you. Moving on from air, water. So I've always incorporated some way to carry water into my bags. In one particular bag, I had this 1 quart canteen in there and had this, I don't know what the name for it is, this outdoor water bottle made out of aluminum. Something to carry water with you. Now, I've always kept these empty, but I've kept things like bottled water in the vehicle with me. But you can fill these with water. You just need to be cognizant of the fact that if this bag is going to be kept in your car all year round, then when it gets to a winter season, if your area has lots of freezing weather during the winter time, then if you fill this to the top with water, it freezes. You're going to have issues with the container bursting and then leaking water everywhere once it starts to thaw out. Water is probably one of the more important things that you'll want. So always having a case of water in the car, in my opinion, is a pretty good route to go. I keep a case of water, half a case of water in there, and I'll rotate that water out every so often, and that way I'm keeping a somewhat more fresher stock of water in the vehicle. I don't have the same case of water that's been in there for 2 years. Sometimes I'll drink from that case. I'll get a few bottles here and there, and then I'll just take it out, move it into the house, and put another pack in there, because the plastic that these water bottles come in isn't the greatest kind of plastic. It is prone to leaching, and I just rotate them out. But canteens are a pretty durable means of carrying water. So are the little outdoor bags. This particular canteen, I went ahead and threw a couple of MRE packages into the back of it here so that I could have something flavored if I wanted to. Aside from having water containers, carrying water with you and having water with you, it may also be to your benefit to have the means to purify water if you need to. So you could come across a water source and you need to filter it. A mini Sawyer water filtering device is a pretty good product that I would highly recommend. I've used it. It's pretty good. If you don't have a dedicated water purification filtering tool in there, you can improvise. You could do something like take one of those water bottles and cut it in half, invert it, put some type of filtering substance inside there, pour the water in through the top, and you'll end up with some filtered drinking water. But just because it's filtered doesn't mean it's purified. Then you have to find a means to purify it as well, and that could be in the form of water purification tablets, or you keep a little bottle of bleach or something like that with a little eyedropper and you can drop it in there. That takes time and takes extra resources. Now you're having to carry all this other stuff. The best option, in my opinion, is to already have the water there with you in the form of a case of water that you keep in your car. And as a backup to that, you could have some water purification tablets. Probably be the least space consuming object that you could have. Shelter is going to be probably the third most important thing. Protecting yourself from the elements, especially if it's going to be summertime or wintertime. And this doesn't necessarily always mean some type of structure to be sleeping in or taking cover in. It could also encompass the type of clothing that you're using, because clothing does keep you protected from the elements. So having rain ponchos, something that's easily packable and stowable, doesn't take up a whole lot of space. You keep that in the bag, and if it starts raining, if it's spring, early spring, late fall, what have you, it's raining, something like that, you don't want to get wet if you're walking long distances, because it's going to get cold and you start running into hypothermia issues. So a poncho, rain gear, something like that to keep in the bag or with the kit goes a long way. Wintertime, your clothing having insulating layers. Now you could keep all the insulating layers and stuff like that in your go bag, but clothing is going to take up a lot of space. I have another video on a clothing cache. You could very easily just take an additional backpack and just pack it full of winter clothes. That way you have a pack with winter clothes that is in there all the time. You don't have to worry about messing with it. Just stays there, and then you can have your get home bag, bug out bag, whatever you call it, sitting there next to it, and they both complement each other. If it's dead of summertime and it's high 90s and you're needing to use your bug out bag, well, you can just grab your bug out bag and go, and leave your winter bag behind, because you're not going to be needing your winter clothes in dead of summer. If it is obviously winter time, usually the clothes that people wear when they leave the house, get in the car and go to work, they're not the best suited clothes for staying outside for long periods of time. Yeah, granted, you might have a nice little fleece jacket or whatever that you've worn from your house or the car, and it's kept you pretty warm, and then you get to work and you wear it around there. It does good for that. If you're going to be spending hours outside in inclement weather, a simple little fleece jacket just isn't going to go very far for you. Those blue jeans, those khakis that you're wearing with nothing under them, they're not going to do you any good. Those dress socks, regular cotton socks, regular shoes, dress shoes, what have you, they're not doing you any good if you're having to walk for miles in cold weather and that stuff. So you'll want protection from the elements, and that should be coming in the form of appropriate clothing. So I would recommend a separate bag full of winter clothes and good appropriate footwear that you could walk through some snow in. For example, some waterproof boots or something like that. Keep your wool socks in there, your base layer clothing, your insulating layer clothing, your shell layer, a windproof, waterproof jacket and pant wear. Keep that in there. Toboggan, gloves. Keep that in the backpack, and it's its own self-contained unit. Moving on from the clothing aspect and having ponchos and stuff like that, as far as actual tents and things like that, for the most part, I don't see a need in having a tent attached to your bug out bag. Even a little small one-man tent, it's just, to me, it just seems like a lot of weight and a lot of waste of space. Now, for the most part, but there are some case examples, that someone may be planning this bag. They work in a very, very rural area. They live in a very rural area. They're out somewhere out west somewhere where you could walk for miles and miles and miles before you get to another town, something like that. Something in those instances, I could then maybe see the need for a tent. If your vehicle went down and your bug out location is 200 miles away or something like that, okay, yeah, I can kind of see maybe the need for a tent at that point. But if it's going to be nothing that of a long haul and everything, then it's just not something I see the need for. If you're wanting an improvised shelter, you can throw a tarp in your go bag. A tarp could be constructed into a very easy shelter for you to keep rain off you and everything. Emergency blankets, things like that can be used to retain your body heat and everything. But as far as, this isn't really camping, so to speak. Like, we're not going on a Appalachian Trail here, camping adventure. This is getting you from point A to point B. Now, if your bug out location, if you live on the West Coast and your bug out location is on the East Coast and you're having to travel that long distance, maybe you need to look at just moving out of the West Coast and moving to the East Coast closer to your bug out location. You shouldn't be having that long of a distance in between those points. With the shelter and keeping warm, I mentioned emergency blankets, things of that nature. You could, within your survival kit, have the means to build a fire and things like that to provide you some warmth. And I'll get into actual survival kits here in a second. Food is going to be something that It's not going to be that high on the list of things that you need, because your goal is getting from point A to point B. You're not wanting to just live outside for indefinitely. You're wanting to get from point A to point B, or from some unknown point to your destination, hopefully within about 100-mile radius. And so you're not going to need food that's going to last you for weeks or days, even for that matter. Not full course meals or anything like that. You may want something that's high in calories, that can give you some energy while you're walking to your bug out location. But you're not going to be needing a whole bunch of food, because your body can survive up to 3 weeks or more without eating anything at all. Now, yes, granted, you start losing energy and stuff like that. So having things like Cliff Bars, or the military Hua bars or soldier bars, First Strike ration bars, whatever they call now, things like that. Some of your more easy to store and easy to eat foods, like your store-bought foods, something like off-the-shelf kind of stuff. Those could be some decent food options to keep in a bag. You're really going to be limited and not so much limited, but it's going to be more of a burden for you to have food in this bag, because food is going to be the number one thing that goes bad the quickest. Even if you've got MREs, meals ready to eat, if you take an MRE package and throw it in your go bag, and this go bag stays in your car for a whole year, that MRE bag, after that summer season is over with, that MRE is pretty much over with. When you look at an MRE pouch sitting in the trunk of a car for the summer season, and it's reaching temps of 90s and hundreds inside that trunk, high hundreds, then that MRE package is going bad. So when it comes to something like that, you're going to have to come up with a rotation schedule on food. And food is going to be something that you're going to have to stay on top of on this go bag as far as maintenance goes, to keep that fresh and stocked. Even things like freeze-dried food, stuff like that, it's going to be somewhat limited to how long you can keep it in that bag, because it's going to suffer the effects of the high temps. And even when you start using freeze-dried food, therein lies the fact that you're going to have to carry more water just to rehydrate that food. So food is not something that's high on the list, but as far as energy goes, yes, you can get the little Hua bars and the Soldier Fuel bars, Cliff bars, stuff like that. You just need to keep in mind that you need to replace it, I would say, make after summer your replenishment or replacement schedule. As soon as the summer season's over with, take it out. You can eat it if you want, or throw it away and put new stuff in, and replace it after the next summer. That way, you're not going to be having food in there that's been in the trunk of your car for 5 years and it's gone completely bad and is no longer safe to eat. Not much else to say about food, because again, like I said, it's just not something that's really high on the needs list. Communications. So communications is an important thing when it comes to natural disasters, terrorist attacks, stuff like that, when you're trying to reach your people. Cell phones, obviously that's going to be your primary means of communication. But in disasters and terrorist attacks, the cell towers are overloaded. Sometimes it can be difficult to make that phone call, or this could be a grid down type of disaster, and the phone lines just aren't working because the cell towers don't have any energy coming to them. All the power's knocked out. Whatever scenario, alternate, contingent, and emergency means of communications could be in the form of little FRS radios, which have a very limited range on them. It could be something like a ham radio, like one of those Baofeng radios, or another ham type of radio where you've got some frequencies programmed into it that you could utilize in an emergency, whether you do have a license or whether you do not have a license. I'm not advocating people go out there and do illegal stuff, but in a grid down kind of situation, disaster situation, what have you, if you've got a ham frequency programmed in that radio that you could use to reach out a couple miles, 4 miles, what have you, but you don't exactly have your ham license, could you get in trouble for it if you get caught? Yes. Is it easy to catch people who are using ham radios without a license? No, it's not that easy to catch them. Can be caught, but it's not that easy. Could you send a few coded cryptic messages over the air, letting people know where you're at and that you're coming to them, and no one be able to find out who you are? Yeah, sure. Could you go ahead and get your ham license and be able to just operate in those frequencies without any issues? Absolutely. More education, the better. More certifications, the better. CB radios. Let's say you work a job that you have to travel on the interstate. You live in the suburbs, you hit the interstate, and you're going into town, a big metropolitan area, and you need to get back. A portable CB radio, which I have wrapped up in these Ziploc bags in here. You could monitor the CB radio, listen to the truckers. The truckers are going to be able to obviously reach a whole lot more further distance on radio than what you're going to be able to. And those radios, radio to radio, you don't really need repeaters for them. Of course, the portable CB radio is not going to have that much of a range that the truck CB radios will have, but you can still be talking to people within a couple miles and get some information as you're walking down the road, or ask if someone could relay something over that CB net to someone else who has a CB radio. Of course, other forms of communication, light, glow sticks, you get a glow stick, put it on a cord, twirl it really quick, makes a nice big little light show on there. Flares, whistles, things like that. You could incorporate that into your bug out bag. But if we can get on our cell phone first, great. If not, then radios, whether it be FRS radios, CB radios, or ham radios, will probably be a better bet. Things like flares and stuff like that, you're going to have to be pretty much right on your bug out location anyway for those things to even matter. And that could just be a means of communication with people who could already be there, and letting them know that you're approaching and that you're friendly, so that you're not getting lit up. With that also being said, let's say that cell phone communications, something happens to your cell phone, it gets lost. Let's say you're at work, you work in an environment where you can't keep your phone on you, or your phone was in the office and you went down to the lunchroom, whatever, you're separated from your phone, you had to get out, you don't have your phone at all anymore, you get to your bug out bag. One thing you could do is have a container with phone numbers written down on it. That way, if you get to a landline, or you get to a payphone, a scarce kind of disappearing thing, if you get to some form of landline, or you get to someone else who's got a cell phone and they can let you borrow their phone for a couple minutes to call your loved ones, let them know where you're at. Having phone numbers written down on paper would be very helpful, because I'll tell you, I can't remember anybody's phone number. Honestly, the only person's phone number I remember off the top of my head is my mom's phone number at home. That's the only phone number that I can remember off the top of my head. And then, of course, 911, stuff like that. I don't even know by heart what my fiance's phone number is. It's stored in the phone. As I've gotten older, my memory problems have grown. Memory sucks. So remembering a bunch of numbers is hard. So having it written down on paper can make your life a whole lot easier. As far as air, water, shelter, signals, I probably should have mentioned this beforehand. I got a bunch of stuff here in front of me. Maps, so logistics, having maps in your kit would be pretty useful for you, especially again if you are working in the city but you live, about an hour away or something like that. I keep a couple maps on hand. I keep a map of Kentucky and a map of Tennessee. These are the two states I'm in most often. If your normal route home is obstructed for some reason and cell phone networks are down, you can't get on Google Maps, well, you can get on the Rand McNally maps and figure out an alternate route to the house. And look up all major roadways, highways, interstates, stuff like that, and get back home when everyone else is scratching their heads. Even for Tennessee, so Tennessee, there's Nashville is probably one of the places I go to most often, but some of these other places, like Memphis, I try to stay away from Memphis. It's kind of a crap town. But if I were to find myself in Memphis and needing to get back home, then I could. With these maps, if you went ahead and pre-identified your routes from work to home, or even from work to your bug out location, or from work to home and home to bug out location, you could take a mark on your maps, your primary route, and then your alternate route, contingency, emergency routes, what have you. Especially for something like an earthquake disaster. Depending on the magnitude of the earthquake, in Kentucky, being close to the New Madrid Fault, and a lot of our bridges being a lot older, if we have a very large earthquake that hits off at New Madrid, several miles into Kentucky, that it's projected that quite a few bridges could be impacted, especially a lot of the older ones, and they would just collapse. And so if that's the case, then you need to know how to get around that area and how to bypass it. Of course, the National Guard's already identified their routes. Going one of them, I can tell you, to bypass, possible bridges that could be down. One of the National Guard's routes from Frankfurt area, where the EEOC is and everything, one of their routes is to go all the way down into Tennessee, actually, and then come right back up into Kentucky, just based off the roads and the bridges and stuff like that. Newer bridge constructions that are a little bit more resistant to earthquake. Those were some more optimal routes in the event that some of these smaller bridges were knocked out, leading directly to the impact zone. And of course, on your maps, You know, if you have friends, relatives, stuff like that, you can indicate on your maps where they're at. That way, if in between you and your bug out location, you got, you know, cousins or uncles, aunts, whoever who are in between, that could be a resting spot for you until you get back home. You could have their phone numbers, stuff like that, written down on the map. That way, if you don't have your phone, you can at least call them and give them the heads up that you're coming, etc. So maps are another important thing. When it comes to extra stuff in the bag that would be beneficial to you, some type of a rope or cordage, some type of utility rope would be pretty useful if you need to use it. Paracord, you can do all kinds of things with paracord. Paracord's a pretty useful thing to keep in a bag. Duct tape, that's another thing, kind of goes hand in hand with paracord. That's something good to keep in there. If you don't want to have the big old large roll of it, you can take duct tape and wrap it around a pencil or wrap it around one of those little fake credit card advertisement things. That way you're saving space on there. You can find little watertight containers. Like if you go to the liquor store or whatever, you know, you can buy something like this that has an alcoholic drink in it. Drink it, wash it out, save it. Now you got a watertight container. The store documents in, got phone numbers in here on paper, and I've also got money in here. So I got money and phone numbers in there. That way if I need to make some emergency purchases along the way, what have you, I can. Wipes. Now, in one of my other videos, I've talked about wipes. Wipes is going to be one of those things that you should have on a rotation basis, because eventually these wipes are going to dry out and just turn into dry paper, which defeats the purpose of wipes. But you don't want wipes to keep yourself clean as you go along. If you get someone else's blood on you or something like that, or some type of contaminant, you want to be able to clean that off of you. Maybe a little assortment of zip ties could help you along the way. Some type of cutting tool, some type of little knife to cut little things here and there. You can have more of a fixed blade knife. That way it's a little bit more robust. You can do a little bit more prying and stuff with it. Multi-tool, you can throw a multi-tool in there, do an assortment of things with that. So those are just a couple little, you know, extra things that you could throw in your bag to help with day-to-day life. Flashlights. So you should always, in my opinion, have a fighting light on you. However, your fighting light should be dedicated to fighting purposes only, i.e. illuminating targets that you need to identify as shoot or no shoot targets. It shouldn't be used as your little utility light to look through your bag or look up under a car or something like that. Utility lights are something else that you could store inside your go bag. You know, just simple little flashlights you can keep in there. My other video for long-term storage for bags, you need to take into consideration that, and I'll just touch on it very briefly. I won't go very deep into it. I'm going to recommend that you get lithium batteries. They last a whole lot longer on the shelf. They got about 10 years in them, and they work better in cold weather. Alkaline batteries sweat. They corrode, all this gunky stuff comes out. And if you have this inside a flashlight, well, one, now the batteries are no longer good, but all this corroded crap has got inside the contact leads inside the flashlight. And even if you do put fresh brand new batteries in there, you're not going to be able to make connection. So store your flashlights without the batteries in them. And if you can, keep lithium batteries. But having a good little utility light, something just for general purposes, and two of them, goes a long way. You don't want to use your fighting light that you're going to be using to, if you need to fight people with, you don't want to run the batteries down on it. Keep utility lights. So I mentioned survival kits. Actually, I'll leave survival kits alone. Medical is probably going to be a little bit more important than a survival kit. So you can buy pre-packaged survival kits. You open them up and they got the stuff already in them, or you can buy pouches and make them yourselves, and you can order all the components that you would need for them. I would say probably your best bet is just to get a preloaded option if you don't know a whole lot about medical stuff. For example, this is a package called the VOC that comes from Tactical Response Gear. And it has an assortment of stuff in here. It has a TK4 tourniquet, it's got compressed bandage, it's got gloves, it's got a I want to say it has nasopharyngeal airway in there, possibly. Can't see it all the way. It's got duct tape, it's got a decompression needle. It just has quite a few things in there. It's going to treat a lot of your ABCs. Now, on top of a trauma medical kit, you should also have the means for boo-boo stuff, like an extra little pack of some sort that just has simple crap like Band-Aids, sunscreen ointment, burn ointment, poison ivy stuff, little Band-Aids. That's for little boo-boo stuff. For if you got cut by the homeless dude or you got shot or something like that, you want a trauma kit to address those trauma issues. Do not buy a first aid kit from some department store and think that's going to cover your traumatic medical needs. It's not going to. You cannot take one of these little Band-Aids and treat a gunshot wound with it. It's not going to happen. You can't even take all of these Band-Aids here and treat a gunshot wound. It's not going to happen. So there's a difference between boo-boo kits and trauma kits. And again, you can get various trauma kits online from different vendors, pre-packaged, ready to go, or you can buy the individual components and put it together as you wish. I'll have another video on medical stuff. Survival type gear. Again, you can buy little survival kits that are already pre-made. You can get them. You can get survival kits that come in a little tin can about the size of this, or you can get survival kits that come in something the size of this. Whatever. Your survival kit's going to address your basic survival needs: fire, water, shelter, and signaling. Usually in the form of like a signal mirror, trying to get the attention of aircraft, stuff like that. What I like to do is when I buy a survival kit, I'll look what's in there and then I'll see what needs to be added. And usually I have a pretty darn well modified survival kit. So this one in particular, I've taken a pouch and inside of it is a survival kit. I've actually had this thing probably since Boy Scouts. This package right here. It's a little dry bag. Keeps water purification tablets in there. Little button compass. Signal mirror, matches, all kinds of random stuff. And then I've added to it, I've added a flare in there. Glow stick. Glow sticks is something that's should be in anything you got. And I failed to mention it when I talked about regular flashlights, utility lights. On top of keeping just regular utility lights in your pack, you also want to keep some simple glow sticks. And I have a video on glow sticks on where to find them at and get really good cheap deals on them. Some extra little tea candles in there. So you can have a a kit that just has, you know, some of the highlights, some of the basics, or you can get, you know, like this one used to be the compartment of a fanny pack. Cut the straps off of it. That way, it's just a little bag that I keep stuff in. I got a couple bottle openers on there, a knife, paracords in there, a little middle compartment, a little sewing kit, a little tool, a little knife, a little light, matches, just an assortment of little stuff down in there, wire, water purification tablet, emergency blanket, just all your basic survival stuff is in there. Another smaller survival kit. This one in particular, I want to say that I got it at Christmas time. It was a Dirty Santa gift, if I remember correctly. I want to say I had like a little trash bag or something in there too, but just a little assortment of stuff. And again, you can just buy a very basic kit, or you can get it and you can modify it and add to as you please. Again, as I noted earlier, we're not camping when it comes to bug out stuff, so you don't need all your camping stuff and everything. You wouldn't need, in my opinion, you wouldn't need to carry around a thing of these little starter logs for starting fires and stuff. Like that's just, it's, in my opinion, it's just not going to be needed. Something like if you wanted something to be able to start a fire pretty easily, like this one kit in here, I had the flare in there. You know, you use that flare, start yourself a fire pretty easily with that. You know, you can even, it weighs next to nothing. You can keep some dryer lint in there, you know. As you do your laundry, save the lint, put it in the Ziploc baggie, and that'll help you catch fires pretty easily. But again, the basic camping stuff, for the most part, just isn't going to be needed. And when it comes to your fire starting stuff, like you want some pretty sure shot ways of getting your fire started. You want good storm matches. If you get like a magnesium bar or something like that, you can go ahead and like make a bunch of shavings off that magnesium bar and put it in something like a little film canister, or take one of your old prescription bottles or even an old Tylenol bottle or something like that, and throw a bunch of magnesium shavings down into there. Like this one, I got a bunch of magnesium shavings in here, and it just makes that process quicker for you. That way you're not sitting there for however many minutes shaving that magnesium block, getting a bunch of shavings off, and then trying to get it started. You already got a whole container of shavings on there. Makes your life a whole lot easier if you need to use a fire. Water purification, again, I mentioned that earlier. Something like a mini Sawyer is going to go on pretty good. As a backup to that, you could have some water purification tablets in there. But the easiest thing for you to be doing to make life easier on you is just have a case of water in your car. That way, if you need to leave your car, well, you can fill up the canteens that's in your bag or what have you, or throw a bunch of bottled water in your bag and stuff some in your pockets, and then drink a bunch of them right before you start walking. That way you're already hydrated before you start your trek. I believe that is the most that I'm going to be spending talking on bug out bags. Oh, one more thing. Self-defense. So you should always have your fighting gun on you, obviously. I wouldn't necessarily recommend keeping a gun in a bug out bag, but I mean, if you got the money and you got an extra gun that you could, okay, maybe, possibly, but one thing you need to think about is, what if someone breaks into your car and they steal that bag and it's got a gun in there? Now you've just armed a criminal. You've given them a good gun. And in the long run, when that gun gets used in a street crime, you've now given the anti-gun crowd more ammo, so to speak, in their fight against guns, because now they have another gun statistic out there, some little kid being shot and killed out in the street with a gun. If you're going to be keeping anything gun related in your pack, I would think maybe extra ammunition would be a benefit to you. You keep a couple extra magazines for your pistol in there. You can wrap those magazines up with some Ziploc bags, keep the moisture out of them. You can get some Mylar bags and drop a couple magazines in there and seal up the Mylar bag and keep it on the top of the main compartment of your bag. That way, you know, if you had to fight your way back to your car or something like that, you need extra ammo, or you just want extra ammo and while you're making this long trek or walk, then you got ammo in that bag that's already in a magazine and is easy to use, versus you buy a couple boxes of ammo and you keep a couple boxes of ammo in the bag. If you need that ammo in an emergency, it's not going to be very likely that you're going to be sitting there opening that box and reloading your mags. It just makes a whole lot of sense. Makes a whole lot more sense just to buy some additional magazines, throw them in the bag, and leave it at that. Getting into the topic of, you know, trunk guns and stuff like that, that's another video for another day. But you could also, with your fixed blade knives that you have for utility purposes, of course a fixed blade knife could also be used for fighting purposes. You could even go so far as to keep things like impact weapons in there, like a baton, and the baton could also be used to break out windows and rake the window frame as well, once you've broken that glass, to clear those shards out. So it's also a tool in that aspect. But this is probably the most that I'm going to be talking about items to be put in your bug out bag. So again, I didn't want to make this into a show and tell, you know, throw my bag out on the table and like, hey, yada, 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 this is what I keep in there. I just want to touch on the highlights of items that can be kept in a bug out bag, just to give you some ideas so that when you start your bug out bag, you start off from a pretty good start. And again, I just want to reiterate that you need to identify the things that you're going to need and want before you buy your bag. Because if you go buy a big ass rucksack, you're going to fill that rucksack with everything you can just because you can. You'll be like, oh, I got the space. I need this shovel. I need this kitchen sink. I need this anvil. Before you know it, you're carrying around a bunch of stuff that's going to be very energy depriving of you, and could also just slow you down and take you forever to get to your location if you're having to walk the rest of the way. And these bags, yes, the bags can be used as backpacks and walk, but at that same time, these bags are also like storage containers. So you could overload your bag with some extra stuff because it's going to be sitting in your car and it's now a storage container. And if you need to offload some stuff as you go, say for example you don't have a separate bag with clothing in it and you keep your main bag with extra clothes in there, stuff like that, it's dead of summer and you got some winter stuff in there, yeah, sure, you can take that stuff out of that bag, dump it, and move on. If you have any questions, comments, anything of that nature, go ahead and leave them down in the comment section. You can send them messages if you want, but I highly recommend you leave them down in the comment section. Don't be afraid of asking stupid questions. There's no such thing as stupid questions. Earl Henderson, Primordial Defense. Thank you for watching.